we got to start with the Jimmy Butler stuff up top, because this is
that's like the big one. Yeah.
We've heard the Jimmy stuff for a while, just because of the contract being up in the air. Jimmy having his moments where he just loves to be the center of attention and say things. And so it sounds like, based on this, there are 3 teams that could realistically trade for Jimmy Butler: the Warriors, the Rockets, and the Mavericks. Obviously, Jimmy is from Houston, as it notes in here. The 2 teams, I think we have basically talked about this. The Warriors and the Rockets were the 2 teams that we picked out as the teams that could be realistic for Jimmy. When we thought about the whole league, what everyone can trade, contracts, where they're at in their rebuilds, all that stuff, I think we went Warriors 1, Rockets 2. The Mavericks are the team that I did not expect at all to be included in this. And I just don't see a way how that is even remotely realistic.
It's not. I like looked at it. So here's the thing, because we're about to see something like really interesting in trying to like figure out some of the like trades for these big salary players, where you've got to kind of move a bunch of people around. Friend of the pod, Harrison, was sending us some Trade Machine War Crimes in the thing, and you run into the problem that like there's just not a lot of guys that like make the requisite money to like send the stuff like back.
Yes.
And for the Warriors, like for example, Andrew Wiggins like has to be involved, and like right off the bat, is Jimmy Butler helping you win more games than Wiggins is this year? That might sound crazy to some people, but like Wiggins is a pretty good fit, like with what they have.
If we had this conversation 8 months ago,
yes,
we would have been like, yeah, of course you trade Andrew Wiggins for Jimmy Butler.
Sure.
But I don't think there's a player in the NBA that value fluctuates more than Andrew Wiggins year to year. Yes. I know that he had everything off the court, and like it's very obvious that affected him, and now he's doing better and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it is weird that every other year it's like, well, the Warriors can't trade Wiggins. And now it's like, I kind of think that he might be too valuable to that team. I mean, to quote our guy Ricky G, Richie Goodman from Twitter, they really don't have anyone who can guard outside of Wiggins to guard the dudes, as he says. Like, Jimmy Butler at this stage of his career is still a good defender, but you don't want him exhausting himself and putting him on the other team's best player, and in a playoff series having to shut down a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or a Jason Tatum or whoever it is that you're playing. And I do think that Jimmy would be – I actually think the fit with Jimmy for what Golden State needs is pretty good in terms of –
really interesting.
Here's why.
Okay.
I don't think that it's a perfect fit. Like, I think that a lot of other guys would be a seamless kind of – like Lowry Markkanen obviously would have been a seamless fit in their system as a Klay Thompson type that they could throw out there with more size that could rebound and whatever.
Halliburton, when they were going to draft him, would have been perfect. Yeah,
there are guys obviously, like that would fit well with what the Warriors want to do.
Yeah.
And Jimmy on paper might not seem like that guy because he needs to have the ball.
Yes.
He tends to control the pace a little bit with whatever team he plays for. But the 2 reasons why I actually think he would be a pretty good fit, one is that the Warriors desperately need a secondary scorer, I think. And that's been their biggest issue. And when Buddy Hield couldn't fucking miss at the beginning of the season, that covered up a lot of the issues that this team has in its construction. When Steph isn't on the court, they don't have anyone who can. Did you see someone posted this the other day? I can't remember which game it was, but a recent game they played, they had a 124 offensive rating when Steph was on the court and a 36 offensive rating when he was on the bench.
That seems impossible.
In a whole game, this happened the other night.
What, did they hit like one shot when he was like on the bench?
They literally could not score when he was on the bench. It was like unbelievable. So
I've never started a number like that.
I think the non-Steph lineups need someone like Jimmy that can at least be the hub of an offense for a little bit. And you don't want to put too much into that, but as Steph gets older, you don't want to play Steph 40 minutes a game. Like, you want to play Steph 29, 30 minutes a game. And on top of that, I do think that the thing about Jimmy is that, like, look, maybe it's just because he's older now and he might not get this. Like, he might not be a perfect clean fit with the Warriors because he needs to have the ball. He free throw griffs a lot. He doesn't have quite as many explosive scoring nights like he used to be able to when he could score 50 points randomly and 40 points, whatever. But for what the Warriors need, like Jimmy's a smart player. He understands, like, I think he would figure out this very quickly. I think you could throw him on the Warriors. I think he would definitely figure out how to play with Steph and Draymond pretty quickly. I think that he would be someone who is kind of fits exactly what they need offensively. Now, defensively, I think he still has some value. He's not quite the defender he used to be, obviously. But more importantly, like, I would worry about the availability more than anything else. Between Jimmy, Steph, and Draymond, you have 3 guys you're building around in their mid-30s that all miss time due to injury. And, like, how good is your team going to be if you trade away Wiggins and maybe Kuminga and all of these guys to make the trade work, and then your depth is just completely gone? And then if one of these guys misses 2 weeks, are you even making the playoffs? Like, that's the thing that would worry me more than like the actual fit. I think Draymond, Jimmy, and Steph are smart enough to figure that out as a trio, personally.
I don't think it's. Here's the thing. Yeah, because you're correct. I think whenever Steph is off, like, Jimmy is like a godsend for like what they would need when Steph's like off the floor. He like perfectly addresses that. I worry about what you're doing to the starting lineup and like the read. Like, I think Jimmy has that capacity, but it's like it's also like not his instinct. I think it would be a pretty significant change for a guy who's always been the best player on his team. You have to go back to like Derrick Rose for like the last time he wasn't the best player on his team. I mean, I guess you could make the argument it was like the Embiid Sixers, but he was still closing games.
They were also the same tier of player. Jimmy had a weird season, but like if you were to rank the Joel wasn't a clear top like 5 or 6 player in the NBA at that point.
Yeah.
Like Joel was still one of the 12 to 15 best players in the NBA, and so was Jimmy. Like it was when he got traded to our team, it was very obvious that like they were similar level players. Jimmy just had a really disappointing regular season. In the playoffs, he figured out some stuff, but like once again, like I don't disagree with the overall point, but I also think that like Jimmy's played in a movement system for years now. Like that's all Miami does. It's not quite to the level that the Warriors do it, but like I don't know, like he is a willing off-ball player and cutter. I really think that this fit would be pretty fantastic. I just worry about the availability more than anything else.
Are you worried about the capacity, the Draymond Jimmy capacity for being the most annoying locker room of all time?
I think that those two would get along amazingly.
They certainly would.
They would definitely want to kill each other sometimes,
yes,
but I think that they would get along really well. Like I think that they would be. And once again, like it's very funny because literally you would have to, if you want to keep Wiggins, I figured out a trade.
Okay.
You would have to do a 6-for-1 trade, which never happens in the middle of the season. It would have to be Melton, Gary Payton II, one of Kyle Anderson or Buddy Hield, Kayvon Looney, Jonathan Kuminga, and Trace Jackson Davis, basically. Yeah. That's just not going to happen, is the thing. And
someone's got to go to Detroit too, like to make the trade work. I'm pretty sure, right?
Detroit? Yeah,
because they aren't the Heat, because the Heat can't. Here's the other thing about
the Heat. They have their first apron, but both of these teams, it would be within $500,000.
Right. Here's the thing: the Heat are not paying the tax this year. Especially
no, they're definitely not. The Heat,
Jimmy Butler,
the Heat take back $500,000 plus. I mean, you could figure that out, but my point is that this isn't happening. There's no point in even discussing it because there's no way a 6-for-1 trade in the middle of the season has never happened.
I'm not even sure it's legal because I think you need to like you need to have your signings like ready to go because there's roster minimums. You know what I'm saying? You have to have a certain amount of.
You can go 10 days without having. I know this just from the Sixers. Will regularly like sign guys to like 10-day contracts to like reach the minimum to avoid the tax. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen. I don't even want to spend any time on this. I'm just illustrating how hard it is to make a trade happen without Wiggins. Yeah. Now, if you're the Heat, so here's just dropping this for a second. I don't think they're going to trade Jimmy Butler. I think this is, we're going to do our due diligence. We're going to hear the offers that are out there because we don't want to pay him another $50 million a year or whatever he wants with this next contract because he's 35 years old, just turned 35.
Yeah.
Will be 36 by the time this contract even starts because he wants to opt out after the season and sign a new contract. So he's going to make a lot of fucking money from age 36 to age 39 on his next contract, which, look, Jimmy's still a good player. We've talked about the list of players who have been good from age 36 to 39, and it's not a long one. It's a very short list, and most of those guys don't even have the knee and injury history problems that Jimmy has. And the thing that I think that this works out, I tweeted this yesterday, and I said, I think this is, for all three sides, this is perfect. Okay. The Warriors can go to Steph and their fans and say, look, we tried to get a star. They wouldn't trade us Jimmy. Like, we tried to get him just like we did with Lauri Markkanen and just like we did with Paul George. And those were definitely real trades that we tried to pursue. And we definitely were really trying to make this, get a third star for you and Draymond and be a championship level team. And then the Heat can say, oh, well, we get to keep our franchise icon guy. We sent a message to the rest of the league that we're not just giving up we treat stars just like the Lakers treat stars. We treat stars really well. Mm-hmm. Have the Heat ever traded a star? I think the answer is, if you don't count wash guys.
Yeah.
Because Jimmy's still good. Like, that's the difference between when they traded Shaq or they traded Kyle Lowry or whoever was a star at one point. Yeah. They let Wade walk in free agency. They let LeBron walk in free agency. Yeah. They traded, I think they might have traded Alonzo Mourning to the Nets, but I think that he had health issues. He had he had kidney issues and all this stuff. And he eventually came back to Miami and played for them later in his career. So like, and this, by the way, that was pre-Pat Riley too, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So, or at least was around the beginning of his tenure. So long story short in this, the Heat have never traded. They would prefer just to let them walk in free agency. So I think that one of these three teams that Jimmy's willing to go to and sign an extension with would need to give up real stuff to get him. And why are you giving up real stuff to get Jimmy Butler at age 35 who wants this huge contract? The Warriors are the only one that makes even somewhat sense in my mind.
I think there's a team that kind of makes in a vacuum makes sense, but in the context of the greater NBA, I don't think it makes sense.
Who's that?
I do think that there's some sense to be made about the Rockets trading for him.
Okay, so what's the offer? Like Dylan Brooks?
Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams, and then whichever of Reed Shepherd or Jabari Smith Jr. You're putting in there. And then whatever sweeteners. Like they have picks, they have whatever.
See, if I'm Houston, I'm staying away from that. And here's why. In theory, I don't disagree with you that makes some sense. Yeah. We talked about the Udoka thing. Like, he loves like dogs. He loves guys.
He'd have his veteran hard ass to whip all the young guys into shape. Like, right.
I get it. Mm-hmm. If I'm Houston, I just signed Jalen Green to a contract that already looks like it's aging like shit. Mm-hmm. And then if I get Jimmy Butler on top of that and he just doesn't pan out, personally, I think that that's too much bad money to get stuck with. When this team is competing with, like, I don't want to say spare parts because they definitely have talent, but like they're better. Their record and the way they played this year is better than their talent, in my opinion. And I think that they should be. I think the Jalen Green contract was a mistake. I've said that the whole time. I think doubling down and getting another potentially bad contract that could age poorly is not the best idea in the world.
Yeah. I think we're in agreement on the things. So my concerns about that is I just don't want to use any ammo up on Jimmy Butler because I think that they've positioned themselves to be like at the top of, like, if Giannis becomes available, if Devin Booker becomes available, if those guys, and I would rather have those guys. I would rather have the powder dry for those guys.
I just want younger players.
Yeah. Then again, there's not a guarantee that those guys, like, it seemed certain that Giannis was going to ask out like a month ago. And now who knows? Giannis could be a buck for life, like, who knows? Like, this stuff all, it's the bird in hand thing, you know. The other thing I would say though, and this is what I want to talk about in the context of slop season and a bigger macro thing. There is one team in the NBA with cap space right now, and it's the Detroit Pistons.
The Nets don't even have cap space?
I'm pretty sure
currently.
Yes, currently, yes. And that is, I'm sorry, that is going to be we've talked about this before on the show. Like that's going to be a pretty fucking significant barrier to like creating trades, because there are a lot of teams that are second apron teams that are hard cap and literally cannot take $1 more in a trade, which effectively means they can't trade with each other.
How much cap space does Detroit have?
Let me look it up. I think it's like $20 million or something like that, or 17.
You keep saying this, but they took the Paul Reed contract on, and they don't have that much. We've talked about this before.
I don't know.
They don't have close to that much cap space because they have Tim Hardaway's contract now. They signed Malik Beasley for $5 million. They took Tobias Harris for $25 million. Paul Reed makes $8 million a year. There's no way they have close to that much cap space. They might have like $5 million.
12.9.
Okay, I was gonna say there's no way it's $20 million. 12.9. Okay, that's actually really good for them, though.
Yes, especially in
is Paul Reed's contract on there, or is that an error? Because I think I just want to make sure.
Paul Reed's is on there, 7.7.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, Paul Reed's contract is on there, so like there's nobody else. The Wizards have negative 20 million. The Jazz have none. They're like exactly they're like I think technically under the cap, but like they're like $1 million one way or the other. They're the Hornets are don't have any cap space. It's literally just the Pistons, and I think maybe the Spurs have some, but I don't think so. No, the Spurs don't have any. It's literally just the Pistons. So automatically, like half the league cannot trade without involving the Detroit Pistons.
So the Pistons are going to either get a bunch of seconds or they're going to get legit players.
Yes,
one or the other.
One or the other. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is what I was saying, like the navigation, where I don't think executives like caught up to this, that like this is going to be like very valuable. This is going to be a very valuable like off season or two to have cap space. And I think it's really going to like impact like some of these deals, because all of the contracts are so big. You're going to need to be making trades for some of these guys, and guys are going to like little spare parts are going to need to get like thrown off. The Knicks and the Wolves did this when they did the Karl Anthony Towns trade, where I think it was the Hornets got someone, like I forget who it was.
They used their MLE and they took in Dwayne Washington Jr.
Yeah.
And then some other, I can't even remember the other like fringe NBA players that they took in. They got their real first NBA contracts from this deal. They ended up waiving some guys, but they got second round picks in it to take on that. They used their MLE to absorb those, because that's another thing, is that teams can use their MLE to absorb.
Yeah.
But some of them are not going to want to spend that, is the thing. The Detroit has to reach the salary floor, as you point out. Like, they either do that or they do what OKC did a few years ago and they give it to the players on the team. They'll probably use most of that cap space. Whereas the MLE teams, that's still spending extra for them. Like, they're still over they don't have to do that. They might use it as a tactical advantage to get extra seconds or swaps or whatever, but they're not going to be doing it just for fun. Like Detroit literally will be able to take back legit money, and they will be able to get an asset or two in the process, probably. Back to the Shams article. I think it's the Dallas thing that makes no sense for Jimmy Butler.
I literally couldn't find a trade, and I literally couldn't find a trade.
I don't like the fit either. Like, I don't like his fit with Luka. I don't really understand it. I mean, I don't even love his fit with Şengün in Houston, to be honest. But like, because of all the reasons that we talked about, with like them being like the rat mode team, turning teams over, I could see them figuring out a way to make that work, but I wouldn't do it if I were Houston. Golden State is the only one I think that is like somewhat realistic. And what it comes down to for me is, do they think that Wiggins is just going to regress back to being, off year Wiggins? And does Miami even want Wiggins and Kuminga, or would they prefer to trade Wiggins to another team and then get like a pick back? Because if you're look, it's Miami, so they'll probably just take the player. That's kind of how they operate. Like they want to compete, they want to be good. I get it.
I will say Wiggins is like exactly a Spo type guy. Like,
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that if there's a contending team that's like, we'll give you like a first and a swap for Andrew Wiggins and like a decent player, like then it might be worth considering if you're, because then you're maximizing the return for Jimmy. But once again, the way that Miami thinks is like they just prefer to get like win now players. I can't remember of a time they've ever traded for a first round pick.
I also, the thing is, I like don't understand what they're doing. I mean, like it's kind of hard. Like people do because the big value add, if you're a market that can do it, is signing unrestricted free agents. It's like a huge value add. It's how the Nets built their super team, crawling out from under the thing, because it's just anytime you can sign a guy without sending picks out the door or any of your salary or any other guys, it's such a huge coup. And that is like traditionally like that's like how the Miami Heat like built like the LeBron teams, because that was all plus value add, all of that stuff. The thing is, since that time, Pat Riley has like low key been like kind of a, I want to say kind of a Spo merchant in terms of like as a basketball executive. Like the in between times, like they had terrible luck with like Chris Bosh. Like what happened to him was like horrible. Like, and that's obviously going to set your franchise back. But like maxing Hassan Whiteside, they were giving out these weird like what would be the equivalent of like $24 million deals today to like Kelly Olynyk and like Tyler Johnson, and like
they had
all
to
of
use,
these.
as Zach Lowe said, they had to use a cap space. They had to do it.
Yeah, they had to.
But this is the Miami thing. We take care of our guys. This is why Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson got paid, even though Tyler Hero's finally living up to his contract. Like, this is what they do. And like the irony of this is that the reason why they're probably going to lose Jimmy Butler is because they overpaid Bam Adebayo.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. Is like,
and they're quietly cheap, as we've played.
We talked about that too. But like, they could probably stomach paying Jimmy Butler $40 million a year for the next 2 or 3 years if Bam Adebayo wasn't getting a full max that he does not deserve. Like he is a fine second contract max guy. He is not a third near super max level contract guy. He's not a 30% of the cap level guy. He's a 20-25% level. Like he's a good player. He's not a changes your franchise kind of player. And the thing that I think the mistake that they made was that, and like I think that they're too stubborn to get out in front of this Jimmy Butler thing and recoup any sort of value. They would see this season and the upside of maybe making another run or winning a playoff series this year as more valuable than trading Jimmy, who's like a franchise like legend, and getting back maybe Kuminga, who they could like revalue and make into like a good player, and Wiggins and all that stuff. Like I think that I really don't see like what they don't do that. That's not how they operate.